Aaron didn't slam the door when he left. He turned the knob like he was still in our house, caring for a hinge, and said in the kindest voice, "I love you, and I'm not going to be your permission slip." Then he set his key on the dining table next to the potted basil, and walked into a September evening that smelled like grills and rain. I stood there with a notebook full of rules, my hands shaking around a pen that had felt like a magic wand an hour earlier. The basil leaves trembled from the draft, as if even the plant understood that a quiet exit can sometimes be the loudest ending. The worst part is that I told myself I was being modern. Ethical even. I wanted to sleep with my ex. Nate, the should have been from college. And I didn't want to be a cheater. So I tried to retrofit the desire into a theory. Open relationships, compersion, radical honesty, several words I'd learned from podcasts while chopping onions. I was going to bring Aaron a syllabus masquerading as care. I practiced the speech. "I think opening up could be good for us, for you, even." I flinched even at my own echo. "For you." The sentence tasted like a lie I'd ironed smooth. Here's how we got to that table with the basil and the key. Nate resurfaced in May at Laura's wedding like nostalgia in a tux. Back in college, he'd been the boy who could talk a professor into changing a deadline and a bartender into closing late. We dated for 8 months and broke up because I wanted a plan and he wanted a tour. He moved to Seattle for a startup that was mostly a friend's couch and a vision board. I blocked him after he showed up outside my apartment at 2 a.m. One night, drunk, singing the chorus of a song we used to mock. He moved away. I moved on. I met Aaron 2 years later, a civil servant with a calendar, a man who reads the user manual before he sets up a lamp. You can guess what happened at the wedding. Nate asked to dance and I said yes, and then every nerve in my body remembered something my brain had filed under, not useful. He smelled like bay rum and a decision I didn't have to live with. I was smart. I left before midnight. I texted Aaron a photo of the cake and told him I missed him. He replied with a heart and home safe, because Aaron's love language is logistics, which when you're adored, feel like jewels you can actually wear. But afterward, the old movie kept playing in my head. It wasn't just the sex, it was being the reckless version of myself. Unplanned, unpinned. The girl whose hair got messed up by the wind and not by a blow dryer. I began to follow accounts about ethical non-monogamy and pretend I was researching sociology. What I was researching was permission. I took notes like a student. Rules equal safety, different forms, swinging versus polyamory. Don't use yenem to patch a wound, no X's. I underlined that last one twice and then pretended it said something else. I told myself Aaron would say no if I asked to sleep with Nate. Because of course he would. And that a system would be safer. Like wanting to jump off a balcony but building a staircase and calling it architecture. In August, I created a document called Openness, thoughts that read like a contract a drunk lawyer might draft. No sleepovers, condoms always, no friends, don't ask, don't tell. I added unless you want to, which is like unless you don't. Specific nights, intimacy at home prioritized, weekly check-ins, compassion pauses. I typed NRE, with a definition, new relationship energy. Beware, and complimented myself for being literate. This is the part where I should admit that Aaron had never asked for any of this. He liked our life the way a person likes the temperature of the bath they're actually in. He loved movie nights and morning coffee, and the way he could predict my order before I knew what I wanted. He worked at the city's transportation department, and came home smelling like paper and rain and the highlighter he kept in his pocket. He has a dimple in his left cheek that arrives when he thinks something is clever. He's the one who fixed the horn on my car after it started blaring without warning at red lights, which is a metaphor my therapist later didn't even bother to point out. So yes, I was that woman, standing in our kitchen with a folder and a speech about liberation while planning to text my ex in a hotel bar. I told myself I was brave for not sneaking. I told myself good women tell the truth, even when the truth is a weapon they want to use gently. I was sober, but the desire made me drunk. He was standing by the stove stirring tomato soup when I started. Can I talk to you about something different? I asked. He turned off the burner. Is it the lease renewal? He said. Because the landlord's already. I shook my head. It's about us. He set the spoon down and faced me like he had practiced, the way you face weather. I launched into vocabulary, compersion, autonomy, trust. I said the culture is shifting, like we were on a panel. He listened, quiet, until I finished, which felt like walking across a rope bridge while carrying a bucket of bees. Is this about Nate? He asked, and the spoon might as well have been a gavel. My face did that heat thing it does when my integrity meets a wall. What? I said stupidly. He didn't roll his eyes. He said, you talked about him in your sleep after the wedding. You said I shouldn't. And you started following 3 open relationship therapists the next day. He had noticed, of course he had. He notices everything. If you want to sleep with your ex, he said, voice even, just say that. Don't drag an entire philosophy into it to make it holy. I'm trying not to lie to you, I said, which is true in the way that telling a cop you slowed down is true after you almost hit a kid. He nodded. Okay. Then let me be equally honest. He took a breath. I don't want an open relationship. Not because I think people who do are wrong. Because I don't want to share you. And I don't want to be in a relationship where I'm plan B to your nostalgia. He looked at the basil. And exes are bad policy. I should have stopped. I should have folded my little document into a paper airplane and thrown it into the sink. Instead, I argued like the kind of person I swore I would never be, the kind who weaponizes therapy words without permission from the woman who actually runs the practice. I said, monogamy is a choice. I'm choosing to choose it with you, but I also want us to be bigger than fear. He said, it's not fear to say no, and I said, it's control, and he said, it's a boundary, and then he stepped around me to get his shoes like he realized he'd left the oven on in another building. I'm not going to be your permission slip, he said at the door, and then he was gone, and the basil leaves shook, and I did that dumb thing where I tried to read the room for instructions. There weren't any. There was a key. You'd think that would be the end, a clean answer to a messy question. It wasn't. I texted Nate 2 days later because I felt like I'd already paid the price and wanted the purchase. If I were single, I typed, and he wrote back, that's a kind of single, which is exactly the kind of sentence that works if you're a person who thinks semantics are shelter. I told him I couldn't. Morals, etc. Then I didn't block him. I told myself I was giving Aaron space while I made sure there was something to blow my life up for. There wasn't. Nate invited me to a bar with light-up menus and whiskey flights. He talked about starting his own design incubator, and then asked to crash on my couch when his sublet ended. Like the calendar is a washing machine he can store clothes in. When I said no, he pouted, adorable at 31 in a way that should be illegal. He put his hand on my knee and I moved it, and he put it back like a dog with a toy. That's when the balloon popped. The air that came out was pure freshman year. I left with my dignity and an Uber receipt. In the car, I opened our group chat. My 2 closest friends, Anna and Tiff. And typed, maybe I made a mistake. Anna sent dots and then, maybe the mistake was starting a lab experiment on your relationship to avoid just breaking up. Tiff wrote, NGL using openness to make one specific hookup okay is like buying camping gear to walk to your mailbox. I hated how right they were. I put my phone face down and cried in the cab like a woman in a movie who doesn't have to tip. The practical fallout was worse than the romance. Aaron and I were mid-lease. Our landlord sent a friendly email reminding us that removing a tenant requires the remaining tenant to requalify for the full rent. My salary could cover it but not comfortably, and definitely not without the part of the budget labeled vacation that had already been a joke. Aaron texted, I'll keep paying my half through the end of the term if you want to stay there. I'll find a short-term place. We were both adults, and being adults sometimes means arranging your own punishment. I replied, I can't accept that. He wrote, it isn't charity. It's a clean break. He included the number for the property manager and a bullet list of what to ask because his logistical kindness hadn't expired with his feelings for me. I moved out in October to a studio with a view of a brick wall and a cat I was fostering because the woman who owned him was in rehab. His name was Miles. He hissed at me for a week, and then fell asleep on my chest like I'd finally passed a test. I breathed around his tiny weight and felt, for the first time in a month, not like a villain, just like a person whose life fit in a smaller square. I sent Aaron a picture of the cat, and then deleted it. I'm not always smart, but I'm trying. I found a therapist. Dr. Lee. Through a sliding scale clinic that bills on a schedule that didn't give my debit card palpitations. The first session, I did the thing where you narrate your actions like a plaintiff. I told him the goal, the rules, the ethics. He let me finish and then said, what were you planning to feel during and after? I opened my mouth and nothing came out. That's the part we should talk about, he said. Because if you wanted to feel chosen while choosing someone else, that's not a structure problem. That's a self-respect problem. He doesn't do metaphor the way I do, but when he does, it lands like a brick. I texted Aaron once. I'm sorry, and then a second time a day later. Not trying to open a conversation. Just, I am. He responded 2 days after with, thank you. Please continue to give me space. It read like a restraining order signed by decency. I obeyed. He owed me nothing. Consent is a rule for feelings too. I saw Nate again by accident at a mutual friend's birthday. He asked me if I'd convinced my guy yet. The pronoun made something in me finally snap in a good way, like a sling being cut. He convinced himself, I said, and he was right. Nate laughed and moved on to a woman wearing a hat that looked like it had opinions. I went home early and fell asleep to a YouTube video of someone restoring a rusty knife to mirror shine. I'm not going to pretend that means anything. Sometimes you just want to watch something broken become useful, and call it therapy. If you're reading this for a legal aside here, no one sued anyone. We didn't own property together. Our lease was boring. There's no clause about moral turpitude for relationships. Our state is at will. Nobody's employer fired them for complicated feelings. Health-wise, if you're wondering, I got tested anyway, because wanting to be open means acting like an adult in actuarial ways. Blood work, swabs, knowledge. Everything was negative except, I guess, whatever virus makes you romanticize a person who once used a grocery store banana for scale in a sext. People ask how Aaron found out. He didn't. I told him before I did anything, and he told me who he was, and I tried to turn it into a debate. That's how you lose without cheating. He wins if we're keeping score, not by getting revenge, not by parading a new girlfriend in front of me, he didn't, but by insisting that his definition of peace wasn't up for renegotiation. He wins because he left kindly, because he paid his half of the lease through December, and then stopped, because he returned my grandmother's mixing bowl in bubble wrap with a note that said, it's yours, and nothing else. He wins because the story he's in now doesn't include me, and he didn't need to burn my house down to exit. I kept going to therapy. Dr. Lee made me write a list of honest reasons I wanted to sleep with Nate and a second list of honest reasons I wanted to stay with Aaron. The first list was a mood board. Novelty, youth, chaos that pretends to be freedom. The second list was a grocery list. Kindness, safety, someone who will pick you up at the airport and bring a banana because your blood sugar crashes in baggage claim. He asked which list felt like a life. I cried like a faucet someone finally fixed. In November, I DM'd a woman who runs an E&M education page, and told her the outline of what I'd done. She wrote back a paragraph that saved me from hating myself too forever. Open relationships can be beautiful, she wrote, but they are terrible devices for avoiding endings. E&M is, at its best, a set of agreements between people who are already skilled at honesty and self-awareness. What you described is trying to use a structure to keep an ex in the present without grieving. It's okay to grieve. That's Monogamy 101 and E&M 101. She added a heart, not sarcastic. I screenshotted it and read it every time I felt like texting someone to ask for permission to stay a child. December came and I bought a tiny fake tree at the hardware store, a string of lights the size of peas. I sent my mom a photo and told her Aaron and I had taken a break because we weren't aligned. She called and asked the kind of questions mothers who've been alive longer ask. Did you hurt him? And are you telling the truth? I told her yes and yes. She said, then send him a card that doesn't require an answer. I wrote, I'm grateful for the time we had, on a plain card and mailed it to his new address, which he'd put in the shared spreadsheet we used to untangle the utilities like faithful accountants of love. He didn't respond. Good. The first clean thing. In January, I saw Aaron at the coffee shop by the river, the one with the small cups and the quiet moms. He was with a woman I recognized from the city's GIS team. A cartographer, which felt on the nose. They were laughing at a pun on a chalkboard about beans. He saw me and did that tiny nod people do in courtrooms and airports. I nodded back and left. I didn't cry until I was around the corner by the mural of fish that looked like exclamation points. I cried hard, and then I went to work and answered emails because feelings don't excuse you from being a person in a job. 2 months later, a friend told me Aaron and the cartographer were taking it slow but happy. I can live with that. Taking it slow is a language I finally want to learn. I hope they map the easiest route to each other every morning. I hope he tells her when he likes her ideas. I hope she buys him a basil plant he remembers to water, and that the leaves don't tremble in any draft, but the one they open the windows to invite. So what did I learn besides the obvious? That telling the truth doesn't make your truth good. That I'm trying not to cheat is not a thesis, it's a confession. That if you want an open relationship, You can say, I want one, and if your partner says I don't, the conversation might just be over without either of you being a villain. That exes are where nostalgia goes to cosplay as destiny. That your body can lie to you about safety and your brain can lie to you about bravery, and your friends can tell you the truth in one sentence you hate, and then later frame. That the quiet way a person leaves is sometimes the only love you get anymore, and you should treat it with the awe it deserves. Do you regret asking? Yes and no. I regret the motive. Sneaking my ex in through a door labeled philosophy. I don't regret learning, finally, that no can be as generous as yes. I'm 30 now. 30 feels like switching from glitter to linen, and discovering you can breathe. I am not an open relationship person. Not because I think no one should be, but because I used it like a crowbar and not a craft. And I still think sometimes about what would have happened if I'd kept my mouth shut and cheated and gotten away with it. I think about the rot that would have lived in my chest like mold. I think about Aaron smelling it, and choosing to live in the rain rather than breathe that. He would have left anyway. This way, at least, he left through the front door in the golden hour, and not through a window at midnight. Last week, I saw Nate on Instagram pitching a course on authentic brand storytelling. He had recorded the video in front of a live, laugh, love sign like a joke no one told him wasn't ironic anymore. I unfollowed him the way you set down a shopping bag you hadn't paid for, but were carrying like proof you deserved things. I opened the window in my studio and Miles put his paws on the sill like a little gargoyle. We both watched people walking dogs and couples sharing earbud cords. I made pasta for one and didn't post it. I put the rules document in the trash on my laptop, and then in the trash in my kitchen because sometimes you need both rituals to feel like you mean it. If you're reading this to decide if you should propose opening your relationship, so you can explore without hurting anyone, make your lists. Then tell the truth first, the one with the fewest nouns. I want to sleep with my ex. If you can't say that out loud, you don't need a new agreement. You need to get brave enough to end what you're in or get help figuring out why new feels like oxygen. If he leaves, don't chase him with theory. Let him go into the evening he's earned. Bless the basil, and buy your own plant. Water it. Watch which way its leaves lean when the window is open. Build your life around that direction, not the one that points back to a song someone sang under your window once because he was drunk and the lyrics were easy. Aaron wins in this story because he refused to fight me on a battlefield I named after my loophole. He wins because he chose a life without audits, and because when he left, he put his key down gently next to a plant he watered and a woman he loved who wanted to feel reckless more than she wanted to feel safe. He wins because his quiet yes to himself was bigger than my loud maybe to everything else. I don't have a ribbon for losing, but I have a room that's mine and a calendar with therapy on Tuesdays and a cat who thinks my chest is home. I have a basil plant on the sill that doesn't tremble when the door closes. Sometimes, when I stir soup, I look at the spoon and think about gavel sounds and verdicts and how sometimes the judge is kindness and the verdict is leaving. I ladle the soup into a bowl, and take a picture, and don't send it to anyone. The steam is the only witness, and that's finally enough.